All right, let's dive in. We're looking at this whole extending versus improving thing today. We found it in an episode of Bythors Tech Insights. And, well, it sounds techy at first, but stick with us. It goes way beyond software. It really gets you thinking. Like, are we always just trying to add more to our lives? Or, should we be working on what we already have, making it better?
It's interesting the way that episode frames it. Like, it's not saying extending is always BD.
Hmm.
Think about it like launching a new app. You're all excited to release these awesome features.
Yeah, totally. You want to, like, wow everyone from the start.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Each new feature you add, that's basically more code piled onto your software. And over time, that code can get, well, kind of like a Jenga tower.
Yeah.
Add too many blocks without a good foundation, and the whole thing gets wobbly.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So what happens when that code base gets too big to handle?
In the software world, we call that technical debt. It's like if you never do maintenance on your car,
Yeah.
you can keep driving it. But eventually, those little things you ignored, they turn into huge problems.
So basically you're saying extending without thinking about improving, it can actually cause more problems in the long run.
That's it. And this isn't just a tech thing. Think about finances, for example. You could keep opening new credit cards, extending your credit, yeah. But if you're not managing your existing debt, budgeting well, you're heading for trouble.
That's a really good analogy. It's like we're so focused on adding more that we forget to look at the bigger picture. We don't think about the consequences down the line.
Exactly. And that's where improving comes in. In software, this often looks like refactoring. It's basically going back and cleaning up the code, making it more efficient, easier to work with.
So it's not just about adding new features, it's about making sure that the core structure is solid. Is there like a real world example of that refactoring idea?
Oh, absolutely. Let's take city planning. A city might keep expanding outwards, new suburbs, new roads. But what about the old parts of the city, the existing infrastructure? If they don't invest in upgrading those systems, the whole city's functionality could suffer. You get traffic jams, outdated utilities, all kinds of issues.
That's a really clear example. So we're not saying growth is bad. We're saying there needs to be a balance. Extending AD, improving, that's how you make that growth sustainable.
You got it. That's exactly what Bythors Tech Insights was getting at. It's about recognizing that sustainable growth. Whether it's in software or a city or even our own lives, it all depends on that balance between extending and improving.
Okay, I think we're starting to get the overall concept, but before we go any further, I want to unpack this technical debt idea a bit more. You said it's like neglecting car maintenance. What are some other ways this debt shows up in our daily lives?
That's a good question. Technical debt isn't just about lines of code. It's any situation where we go for the short-term gain. Instead of what's sustainable in the long run, it could be putting off that doctor's appointment, saying you're too busy, or letting relationships slide because you're chasing a promotion.
I'm starting to feel a little guilty already. I think we all kind of accumulate some life debt at times, but how do we know when it's becoming a real problem?
Well, like with software, there are different types of technical debt. Some are way more critical than others, like ignoring a minor bug in your code. Might not be a big deal at first, but if you leave it alone, it could turn into a major system crash.
So what would be the equivalent of a system crash in our personal lives?
Think burnout, health issues, even relationships falling apart. Those can often be traced back to life debt that we ignored or didn't take seriously.
Okay, this is getting really real now. So if we're always adding things to our lives, commitments, possessions, goals, how do we avoid that trap? Accumulating too much of this debt.
That's where the art of improving comes in. And that's what we'll dig into in the next part of our deep dives. We'll look at how to recognize the signs of life debt, and more importantly, how to shift our focus from just extending to strategically improving.
This is fascinating. We've only just scratched the surface, but I'm already starting to rethink some of my own habits and priorities.
We were really getting into the nitty-gritty of technical debt, not just in software, but in our own lives too. Kind of makes you think, huh?
It does, yeah, but recognizing it is the first step. Once we see that maybe we are building up some of that life debt, we can start making better choices.
Okay, so let's talk about that. How do we actually shift gears, from constantly extending to improving strategically? It seems like everything around us is all about more stuff, more experiences, more connections. Yeah, you're right. We're bombarded with these messages telling us to level up, optimize, hustle, nonstop. But what if, instead of adding even more to our to-do lists, we actually stopped to look at what's already there? What if we focused on making the systems and processes we have more efficient?
I love that, like decluttering your schedule instead of just cramming more in. But how do we actually do that? Where do we even start?
One strategy that really clicks for me comes from design thinking. It's called subtractive thinking. So instead of asking, what can I ADD, we flip it and ask, what can I remove?
Okay, that's a really interesting way to look at it. It's almost like the opposite of what we're used to, right? We're always told saying yes to more opportunities is a good thing.
It can be, for sure,
Yeah.
but not always. Sometimes the best way to improve is to actually subtract. It's about saying no to stuff that doesn't really serve us, so we can make room for the things that do matter.
Makes total sense. And this isn't just about work, is it? What about in our personal lives?
Absolutely. Think about social media. Could you maybe unfollow some accounts that don't inspire you anymore or bring you joy? What about your physical space? Could you declutter your home, make it more peaceful?
Ooh, yeah, I definitely need to do some digital and physical decluttering. It's crazy how much mental space you can free up just by getting rid of excess stuff.
Exactly. And this brings us right back to technical debt. When we remove the unnecessary, we're basically paying down our life debt
Hmm.
and creating a stronger base for growth.
Okay, so we've talked about saying no and decluttering as ways of subtractive thinking. Are there any other strategies to help us switch from extending to improving?
Another powerful tool is what I call the optimization audit. It's about really examining our systems and processes and finding spots where we can be more efficient.
Ooh, I like that. Can you give us a concrete example?
Sure, let's take meal planning. If you're always stressed about what to cook every night, you could try like batch cooking on weekends or creating a menu of your favorite meals that you rotate through. That way you're optimizing your time and energy instead of constantly scrambling for new recipes or ordering takeout.
Such a practical example. It's not about adding more recipes to your collection. It's about streamlining the whole cooking process.
Exactly. And you can use this optimization audit idea almost anywhere, from your morning routine to your workflow to your relationships even.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
That's it. And that's a key part of sustainable growth. It's not about burning ourselves out by trying to do more and more. It's about making our current systems and processes better so we can do more with less effort.
This is making me realize that improving isn't just about fixing problems or getting rid of things. It can be about being creative, finding solutions that make life easier and more enjoyable.
You're right. That's what's so cool about this whole extending versus improving idea. It's not black and white. It's about finding the balance that works in each situation and being open to different approaches.
So if we're constantly being pulled towards extending, adding more to our lives, our work, our commitments, how do we develop that self-discipline to stop and ask, wait, what can I improve here?
Great question. And that's something we'll explore more in the last part of our deep dive. We'll talk about specific tools and techniques that can help us build that improving mindset and make it a bigger part of our lives.
I can't wait to hear more about that. This has been eye-opening already. We've covered technical debt, subtractive thinking, optimizing our meal planning even, but there's still so much more to uncover.
There is. And before we move on, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge. Over the next week, try applying one of these improving strategies to an area of your life that feels overwhelming or inefficient. See what happens when you shift your focus from adding more to refining what you already have.
Love it. Like a mini experiment in sustainable growth. Who knows, you might be surprised by the ripple effects it has on your whole life. And man, I'm really seeing how this applies to like every part of life.
Right. It's one of those ideas that once it clicks, you can't unsee it.
Totally. We've talked about technical debt, getting rid of stuff, even making meal planning better. But before we finish up, I want to circle back to something Bythors Tech Insights talked about, that whole reflection thing.
Yeah, reflection is super important, but people often forget about it. Like in software, engineers use reflection to look at their code, spot problems, and figure out solutions. It's basically a checkup for the whole system.
So how do we do that in our own lives?
Yeah.
Like be more reflective. I
Right.
mean, I know journaling and meditation and all that are good, but sometimes it just feels like another thing to add to my to-do list.
I know, right? It's kind of ironic. Trying to improve our lives, but then self-improvement itself becomes overwhelming. But here's the thing. Reflection doesn't have to be this huge formal thing. It can be as simple as taking a few minutes at the end of the day and asking yourself a few questions.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, you could start with what went well today.
Mhm.
Focusing on the positive, it can really shift your perspective, reminds you of your strengths and what you achieved.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. It's easy to get stuck on what went wrong or what we didn't finish. What else?
You could ask, What could I have done differently?
Mm,
This isn't about beating yourself up. It's about learning and growing. Maybe you could have communicated better, set clearer boundaries, or managed your time differently.
that's helpful, like turning our experiences into learning opportunities.
Exactly. And then the most important question, what am I grateful for?
Hmm. Being grateful is huge EE for improving your well-being. It helps you appreciate what you have instead of focusing on what you don't.
I love that. It's like a little boost of perspective and positivity right before bed. That's it. And the best part about this kind of reflection is that it's flexible. You can do it anywhere, anytime. Write your thoughts down, talk to a friend, or just think it over in your head.
So we're not talking about hours of silent meditation or filling up a whole journal. It's about finding those little moments throughout the day to stop and reflect.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You start to develop that improving mindset without even realizing it.
Right, it's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And just like any muscle, it needs to be challenged. So it's important to not just reflect on your wins, but also on your, failures or setbacks.
Okay, I get how that would be helpful. But that's the part most people try to avoid, isn't it? Nobody enjoys dwelling on their mistakes.
True. It's definitely not the fun part, but it's probably the most important part. Think of it this way. Every mistake is a chance to learn and grow. It's like a free life lesson.
Haha, that's a great way to look at it. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, we can see them as feedback.
Exactly. And when you reflect on those mistakes, you can spot patterns in your behavior, figure out your triggers, and come up with strategies to avoid making those same mistakes again.
It's like we're debugging our own lives, finding the glitches and fixing them.
That's a great way to put it. And like with software, the goal isn't to be perfect. It's to keep getting better, keep improving, and build a stronger system.
This has been an amazing deep dive into extending versus improving. We've seen how it works in tech, in our daily lives, even in how we approach personal growth.
And it all boils down to finding that sweet spot between pushing ourselves to do more and taking care of what we already have.
So listeners, as we wrap up this episode, remember this. Sustainable growth isn't about reaching some finish line. It's a journey. It's about making deliberate choices, facing challenges, and celebrating your progress along the way.
And don't underestimate the power of reflection. Make time to pause, assess, and appreciate everything you've achieved.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new ideas and maybe inspired you to think about growth in a more mindful and fulfilling way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.